Mel Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion
My
Power
name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Jazz Confusion Power Hour on the Source TV radio network. I'm your host, Mel Albin, for the Power Hour. I'm the founder of the show also. And let me tell you a little bit about, for those of you that are new to the show, let me tell you a little bit about the Power Hour, a little bit about Source TV Radio Network. Um, the Power Hours, I created it because I wanted to have a venue that you can get to know the artist behind the music. You know, you love the music, you've heard it, you may have even gone to see the artist, but how does the artist go about the process of creativity? How do they bring you that music that you love so much? So I want to give you a little an insight into the backgrounds of a lot of artists and take you kind of backstage into their mind so you can understand the process of creating music. The Power Hour broadcasts weekly on the Source TV radio network, and we stream in 4K and Dolby True HD. We're the only station, I believe, that streams in Dolby True HD. Let me tell you about Source Radio. Source TV Radio is a nonprofit 501c3 radio station. We support jazz and anything connected to jazz, jazz crossover. It could be jazz gospel, jazz rock, jazz R&B, you name it. As long as it has a jazz influence, we want to bring it to you. We play jazz 24/7, and we also have a secondary interest, and that is Black minority micro businesses that are too small, oftentimes, to be on Amazon or Shopify. But these businesses are vital, and they comprise 95 to 98% of all the Black businesses in the United States. And they're typically sole proprietorships, and they typically don't have employees. But these businesses are vital for the development and transfer of generational wealth, and also for building equity and inclusion in communities. So Source assists these small businesses by giving them airtime on our radio station so they can explain their services and their products to everybody. So we're a nonprofit, commercial-free broadcast network with adult jazz and adult music. We depend on listener contributions, which we do get, and we depend also on the artists who appear on our shows and who we help promote for our mutual support, and also our sponsors to cover our broadcasting costs that are ever increasing in this world. You know how that goes. So any contributions are greatly appreciated. And remember, any donation that you make is always tax deductible. The Power Hour has had over 125 amazing artists, well known, and if not already known, becoming well known. They're musicians, vocalists, they're arrangers and producers. And some of the artists that we've had in the Power Hour include Eric Roberson, Mesa, Brian Culbertson, Paul Brown, Raheem Devon, Reagan Whiteside, Alex Harris, Greg Adams, Tom Brown, Costello, Pieces of a Dream, um, Kamasi Washington, Kiko Matsui, Kim Scott, Sheryl Crow, Billy Ocean, Tom Braxton, Annie Lennox, Dwelle, Costello, Marie Antoinette. I mean, I can go on and on. We've had just a tremendous array of really wonderful artists. And we've had Eric Darius, Jeff Beck, Eric Burden, and many others. So, when you tune in, you're going to get the best in jazz and jazz crossover artistry of some of the finest performers that are playing today. Tonight continues the Power Hour tradition of great artists each week. As a recording artist, he has topped the Billboard radio charts over 10 times. His collaborations have topped the charts nearly another 10 times. He has recorded and performed with a number of world-class musicians, including Michael McDonald, Roberta Flack, Jonathan Butler, Kiko Matsui, Johnny Gill, Jeff Osborne, Sheila E., Marcus Miller, Will Downing, Earl Klug, Jeff Lober, Peter White, Peebo Bryson, Brian Simpson, and many others. He has quickly become one of the jazz's most thrilling and innovative and emotive performers as he continues to stand out and push boundaries as a composer, performer, teacher, and recording artist. He blends Caribbean rhythms that come from his childhood and from his roots with skillful horn textures. His playing is full of surprises. His inspirations were Grover Washington Jr., Kirk Whalum, Najee, yet he displays his own fresh ideas and distinctive tone. So much so that the New England Urban Music Awards and the Barbados Music Awards both named him Jazz Artist of the Year on multiple occasions. He's also an avid sports fan. He's performed the national anthem on numerous occasions for such teams as the Boston Celtics, the Boston Red Sox, Arizona Diamondbacks, Cincinnati Reds, and Los Angeles Dodgers. He's also has a foundation, which we'll talk about during the show too. He's the executive producer and host of the Barbados Jazz Excursion, a jazz and golf weekend getaway which brings over 300 musician lovers to the island every Columbus Day weekend. He's the founder of the Never Lose Your Drive Foundation, a nonprofit which directly funds the the Head Start music program. Uh, Music provides free weekly instrument instruction to students ages 7 to 11 on saxophone, trumpet, flute, clarinet, and percussion. He's also an educator and he's on the faculty of the Berkeley of Berkeley College of Music in Boston. So please welcome. I'm really delighted to bring you a special guest tonight, Elan Trotman. Welcome, Elan.
Hey, how are you, Mel?
I'm doing great. Um, I just gave you a long introduction so people will be familiar with you. So I like to start out all my shows by asking you basically, since 2024 is winding down and 2025 is right on the doorstep, what's cooking? What are you going to do for the rest of the year, and what do you have planned for next year?
Um, well, I got a couple shows left in 2024. I'm playing in Akron, Ohio this weekend, and then I got my annual Boston holiday show in December, and that's about it. 2025, I got a couple things lined up. Charlotte, North Carolina, West Columbia, South Carolina, Los Angeles, San Diego, South Africa. Looking forward to going back to Cape
Oh, wow.
Town.
Okay.
So, stuff is starting to come in for 2025. So, finish up the semester at Berkeley. We got about 2 or 3 more weeks, and then get ready for the spring semester. Some new students coming in.
Terrific. Well, it sounds like you have a full plate, that's for sure. So,
Always.
I really want our audience to know a lot more about your background because your background is a little different than a lot of musicians. You were born and raised in Barbados in the Eastern Caribbean, and it's a small island. And I understand after talking to you that you lived close to the capital, Bridgetown. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your childhood, music in your household, when you found the sax, some of your earliest musical influences? So, why don't you start off with that?
Sure. I attribute my musical exposure to my parents and somewhat to my grandparents. Barbados is predominantly a very Christian country, and most families attend church on a regular basis. So my mother and my grandparents would always be singing church songs and at home or listening to gospel music, and that kind of opened my ears to just hearing pitches and singing in harmony, because a lot of times my mom would harmonize with the lead singer, and my dad would also have the guitar playing around, not professionally or proficiently playing, but enough to play a couple chords. And then they were able to put me into piano lessons, formal classical piano lessons at the age of 10. So that's how I got my musical start. And once I got to middle school, I transitioned to band instruments. The first instrument that was available was a French horn. So my first encounter with actual band instruments was the brass family. I played a little French horn. I played a little euphonium, which is like a
Yeah.
smaller version of a tuba or baritone. And eventually, I was able to get my hands on a saxophone. And the rest is history.
Did you want the sax, or did it just happen?
I always knew I wanted to play the sax. I had gotten to see Grover Washington Jr. perform live in Barbados, and I also watched a ton of music videos with Najee and Kenny G, Dave Koz on the music video channel, as a teenager. And I'd already, kind of made my mind up that I wanted to go to Berkeley because we had some Berkeley alum that came back to the island and were doing some teaching. And one of them mentored me. So I knew I wanted to play the sax. Once I saw Grover and he had four saxophones on stage, man. He had the baritone, tenor, alto, and soprano. And he might have even, I think I saw him playing the sopranino also, which is a smaller version of the soprano. So
Yeah.
that sold it for me. And Grover was always very fashionable as well, always dressed very dapper, his nice full beard and linen garbs and stuff. So yeah, I was just waiting for the opportunity to present itself.
Some of my friends that I've had on the show, I'm sure you're familiar with Pieces of a Dream, and Curtis Harmon, and also the keyboard player who I just drew a blank, who I know so well,
James Lloyd.
James Lloyd. Thank you very much. This is part of my aging process. But Grover took them on tour when they were in high school. So there's so many. He influenced so many people in the jazz world. So many people. He's just an amazing presence. So tell me a little bit about when did you first start to compose music or think about writing your own compositions?
So when I was playing in school band, concert band, jazz band, it wasn't much opportunity to do original music. However, um, I was able to join a local gospel group called the Miraclettes. And they did a lot of covers of, Black American gospel singers like Kirk Franklin and stuff like that. But out of that situation, I was able to form my own band. So I think the name of the band was Inspiration, maybe the first band that I was a part of. And we wrote some original music. Probably I was about 15 or 16 years old, and we actually were able to open up for the Miraclettes on some festivals and some gospel fests. And eventually, I started to transition from the gospel to gospel jazz to jazz, contemporary jazz, and started to get booked at some local hotels and some corporate events.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Given the fact that you were near Bridgetown, did you hang out in clubs? Did you perform or work in any of those venues? What was it like? And what kind of
Yeah, I mean,
exposure did you get?
tourism is number one, source of revenue for the island, which is for most islands in the Caribbean because of our beautiful beaches and warm weather. So it's very easy for musicians to work 3, 4, 5 nights a week, be employed at various hotel properties, whether it's with a quartet or just a one-man band playing along with pre-recorded music on your iPad. So I had a lot of opportunities to perform in the hotel circuit, and that was an opportunity to practice, the things that I was learning and trying out. That was a good opportunity to try them out in front of a live audience. And the music of the Caribbean, obviously, very heavily leaning towards calypso and
Mhm.
reggae music, Afro-Cuban, Latin,
So good. Yeah.
anything tropical. Yeah, soca, exactly.
Yeah. I mentioned to you before we started the show, somebody who I know who has a show on my station. His name's Dion Parson, and there's a down in the islands, St. Thomas, St. Croix, those islands. They started about several years ago something called Jazz Ribian. Are you familiar with that?
No, but I like it already. Jazz Ribian.
Yeah, and let me tell you what they're doing. Dion he's been on at least 100, 150 different recordings from other artists besides his own solo work, and he works with Wynton and Branford Marsalis also. And the Caribbean influence, the diaspora going from Africa through the Caribbean to New Orleans and to the U.S. There's such a rich jazz history, and they've incorporated the steel pan and other kinds of instruments from the Caribbean into the jazz, and they're connecting it to Africa, and then the dispersal of that music to France, to England, the United States, Germany. And it's the new genre or subgenre is being called jazz Ribian. So
Yeah,
it's a,
interesting. Well, there's a long lineage of, fusion with jazz and the music of the Caribbean, even as far back as Dizzy Gillespie, because
right.
Dizzy spent a lot of time in Cuba and the Spanish-speaking islands, and he was one of the pioneers of, Afro-Cuban jazz.
That's right.
And um, one of my favorite bands that kind of, was very instrumental in fusing the music of the Caribbean with contemporary jazz was a band called the Caribbean Jazz Project with Andy Narell, who's on steel pan, Dave Samuels on xylophone, Paquito de Rivera on saxophone and clarinet, and I think Mark Mark Walker, I think, on drums. They were on a label called Heads Up, and they put out a bunch of records, and that was, a big deal for me to hear the steel pan being played in a contemporary jazz setting,
Right.
and that's definitely one of my inspirations.
Yeah. Dion's had two of the biggest steel pan artists on his show, and I'm relating to Dion because of your history in the Eastern Caribbean. John Faddis has worked with him for many years also, and he was a student of Dizzy's. So, so much, the mentoring process within the Caribbean jazz um, genre is very striking, and people are just starting to learn about it. It wasn't that well known because calypso, and reggae, those were the big sounds, but nobody really knew the rich texture of jazz within the Caribbean. So, that's why I wanted to have you on the show because I've followed you for a long time and I love the jazz influences. And, some of the music we're going to play tonight, we can demonstrate that and you can talk about it with some of our listeners tonight. So, what came next? So, after you finished public school on the island, what happened next?
I applied to Berkeley College of Music in Boston. I got accepted, and I was also awarded a National Development Scholarship from the Ministry of Education, the division of the Barbados government, full scholarship. So fortunately, my parents didn't have to come out of pocket to pay for any expenses
Okay.
related to my studies, and I was able to complete my 4-year degree in music education. Um, I knew that I would always end up touring and performing because I had done it even before I attended Berkeley. I was already gigging, so I didn't feel it was necessary to, major in performance. I said, let me focus on another degree that will give me an opportunity to have, some additional income as well as certification to be able to get hired in, a public school system or at a university or a college. And it's worked out well for me because having the certification allowed me to teach in Boston public schools for over 10 years at the elementary and middle school level, and most recently getting hired on the faculty at Berkeley as an associate professor. This is my 4th year at Berkeley. So, no regrets for choosing the educational route. It still allows me to tour and travel, at my discretion. but I know I have that security
Sure.
where I can, kind of gig on my own terms.
Yeah, the amount of people that have been on my show, Dion's show, some of the other shows on the Source Radio Network that went to Berkeley. Berkeley's reach goes everywhere. It's like one of the premier colleges for
Yeah.
musicians. So,
I
um,
saw I
yeah.
just saw an Instagram post yesterday with a Berkeley alum that was at Berkeley when I was there back in the late 90s. And he's currently on tour with Dave Matthews. He's originally from Tortola, and his name is Rashawn Ross. He's a trumpet
Oh,
player,
yeah,
and they recently
yeah.
got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was on campus yesterday visiting and sat in on some classes. So, a long list of successful alum that
Oh,
are
yeah.
doing big things on a national level.
You must have been shocked when you found the weather in Boston after living on, Barbados.
What's even more crazy is that I started in the winter of 1998. So I started spring semester. So I went from 85 degrees, 25 degrees in a matter of hours. And that was my first time experiencing winter. I remember my dad, when we got off the plane and we stepped out of the airport, immediately he had an instant nosebleed because we weren't dressed, we weren't ready for it, man. But it was a nice change of pace. I actually enjoy the seasons now. They're talking about possible snow for Thanksgiving, first snow. It's a nice change of pace as opposed to consistent, hot all year round.
Yeah, there was a when I was when I was the executive director of the Graduate School of Business at the University of Maryland. I hired someone who came from Neves, and he told me a story that when he was 10 years old, his parents moved to New York, and when he went to get off the plane, his mother put a coat on him. He had never worn a coat before, and said, "Wear this." So he got off the plane in the cold weather, and he immediately took the coat off and told his mom, "I'm not wearing this coat. It's making me cold." He thought it was a coat. He'd never been in cold weather before, So those are kinds of culture shocks. And Dion Parsons, who I mentioned to you, he had to go buy his first coat at a secondhand store in New York. When he moved to New York to start performing, also. So it is a shock to a lot of people. Well, so let's play one of your songs for everybody. I want to start so people can hear your music. I want to start off playing Brighter Days. Why don't you tell everybody the backstory on Brighter Days?
Sure. Brighter Days Ahead was an album and a single that was composed and produced in the earlier part of the pandemic. So after about 6 months of being quarantined and not being able to tour and travel, I started to write, and I ended up composing 10 songs. And thanks to technology, I was able to send them out to different musicians all over North America, and they were able to record their parts virtually. So Brighter Days Ahead is the title track, and I was fortunate to have a special guest guitarist, Mr. Adam Hawley, featured on that track, on the title track, and that song made it to the top 25 on Billboard, and it's the single from the album Brighter Days Ahead. Obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory, coming out, in the middle of a pandemic,
Yeah.
pretty dark times, pun intended, and we were just all as musicians and creatives, we were inspired to write and to express, all the emotions, the different the so many different emotions that we were experiencing during that time, not being able to be together, not being able to be in front of fans and feel the energy of the audience, having to do concerts, via Facebook Live, and going out and buying, all this equipment to stream and figure out how to do live concerts online. It was a weird time, but something positive came out of it for me, which is the album Brighter Days Ahead.
A number of artists I've had on the show, Brian Culbertson, he went out and bought some high tech equipment because he came up with the idea. Not only did he create this show, The Hang, started on Tuesdays, but he had so many people, he moved it to Fridays. But he decided to compose music with his subscribers, and he featured them. They're listed as executive producers, and with BMI on some of his recordings that became top 10. So a lot of artists, Mesa started Mesa's Kitchen. It was a time of innovation and other ways to reach your fans because they were hungry for music. You were hungry for fans. It just was a two-way street, but everybody had to adjust. So it was a big period of creativity. So let's play the first track of the evening. And I think everyone's going to really enjoy your music. Brighter Days. All right. There's brighter days. We have some interesting comments from people who are tuned in already. This is from Carol Lawden. Boy, do we need brighter days now. Music is the universal language of togetherness. Here's another comment. Love the arrangement, the breaks, the key changes. Well done, Elan. That's from Ralph Sussman. Um, Makes me smile, Lorraine Day. And Mel Castro. Excellent. Love your sax. So you're making some new fans out there already.
Haha.
You might. Okay, go ahead.
I was jamming. I don't know if you could see me off camera, but I was grooving to it, man. It's once you put your music out, once you record it and you release it, it's like it's the most rewarding feeling ever because it's now public domain and it can be shared with the masses, and it's always humbling to know to know that the song uplifts people and that it's able to impact people in a positive way. So I'm always humbled.
How did you feel when you heard your first song on radio?
That would have been Lovely Day from my album This Time Around, 2002 or 2003. And I pulled over. I had to pull over and savor the moment. Um, yeah, that was when I officially became a national recording artist.
Did you know that it was going to be played on the air, or did it surprise you?
Yeah, I knew it was added to the rotation of some major radio stations. I just didn't know when it would be played,
Yeah.
so I just kind of kept my radio on the dial. And even to this day, when I hear my music being played as I'm driving the car, it just brings a smile to my face, and you just celebrate. You celebrate yourself. Life is short, man.
Sure.
Celebrate the simple
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree with you 100%. We were talking about you going to Berkeley, um, and you obviously living in Boston, a big change from Barbados. What influences did Boston have on your musical development? Did it have any influence directly that is separate from just Berkeley, but the environment in Boston, the clubs, the music?
Definitely. Coming from a small island of less than a quarter million people to a big state like Massachusetts and going to an institution like Berkeley, where, back in Barbados, I was looked up to as one of the, up and coming or most talented, next in line, next generation of musicians. Whereas you come to Berkeley and everyone else is also regarded as the top, of their class
Mhm.
and getting full scholarships as well. Many of them were already performing at a very advanced level because they attended, performing arts high school and they were exposed to a lot of music that I didn't have access to, like, bebop records and giant steps and Donnelly, so once I got to Berkeley, you know, it was overwhelming because I would walk through the practice rooms and I would hear, students playing, these songs that I was hearing on records, but they were playing and practicing them. So it was like a sense of urgency for me to try to catch up because I wasn't exposed. I didn't have access to those resources and that environment. So I went out and I bought me a real book, which is kind of like the Bible of jazz standards. And I went out and bought Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. I went out and bought Giant Steps by John Coltrane. And I started to transcribe, some of the well-known solos and just get familiar with the vocabulary and the language. Um, you know, I I never really wanted to play, traditional jazz because I was listening to more contemporary artists like Grover and Michael Brecker, Kirk Whalum, Gerald Albright. But I could also hear a lot of them, a lot of the legends of jazz, the forefathers of jazz, like Coltrane, and I heard a lot of Cannonball Adderley, and
Wow.
Gerald Albright, and so that kind of forced me to go back a little further and study the greats, um, because even though it's contemporary jazz, you still got the word jazz in there. So if you're going to play jazz, you have to understand how to speak the language fluently. And bebop, is a language that was cultivated by people like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, which is a very advanced you know style of improvisation. So I just wanted to educate myself and make sure that I was versatile and be able to fit into any musical situation. I don't want to limit myself as far as opportunities.
That's great. And this is what I want people to understand. The amount of time and dedication that artists like yourself have to put in to craft the music that goes out on the airwaves. It's not something that just throw it out there. It takes years of study. You have to learn from the legends, and then you have to create your own style too. It's a very complex process, and that's what I like.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
even just listening to Brighter Days Ahead, my improvisation on those chord changes, I was throwing in some bebop language and, that I was taught from one of my professors, Andy McGee, who, rest in peace, he was, in that era with Train and Bird, in the 40s and 50s. And he published a book that had some excerpts from John Coltrane's improvisation, and he had me study them. And it's funny because I heard some of those lines and some of those excerpts in my improvisation on Brighter Days Ahead, just subconsciously. It wasn't intentional, but it's the way we speak. It's like you learn, the more vocabulary you learn, as you learn to speak a language, the more verbs and the more pronouns and the better you can conjugate those verbs and form sentences and phrases, the more you can say musically. And that's something I take pride in. Like I said, I feel like there's a lot of controversy and a lot of biases towards musicians that play contemporary or smooth jazz. Um, and it's kind of frowned upon because it's somewhat commercial as opposed to the authentic, straight ahead and traditional jazz. So I just try to be true to the origins of jazz, even though I've decided to brand myself as a contemporary jazz artist.
It's interesting when you talk about that because smooth jazz has incorporated so many other genres and subgenres, and in some ways, it's muted some of the jazz, like bebop, like you talked about earlier, and some of the improvisational work, like Miles Davis. It's a mixed bag, actually. It's the dominant form of jazz today, but in some ways, to me, it's kind of lost its roots to a large extent. And it's very repetitious. And the reason I wanted to have you on the show, Elan, is because you bring something so new and refreshing to smooth jazz and contemporary jazz. Your jazz is jazz calypso, it's jazz R&B, it's jazz soul. And but it gets pigeonholed as smooth jazz. And I think it's far more than that. And you know,
Yeah,
and you personify something. One of my favorite quotes from Miles Davis. He said, "The notes are only a guide. It's the musician that makes the sound." And the note doesn't tell you very much. It's a starting point. How loud you play it, how long you hold it.
yeah,
How you curve the note. He said that's got nothing to do with the notation. It has to do with the artist. And
yeah.
that's what
Miles
you.
Miles was a genius, man. Miles took a lot of liberties, broke a lot of rules,
Yeah.
musically. Rumor has it that he wasn't um, he didn't have the theoretical training that most musicians had. A lot of his biographies, they said he didn't read music. I don't,
Mhm.
but he would just have full control of whatever he had to say musically.
Yeah.
And even a note that didn't theoretically fit that chord at that particular moment in time, he made it sound like it worked. He broke all the rules. And like you said, there's a lot of overlap. If you look at Miles's later work, the electronic stuff, he was collaborating with, David Sanborn and Marcus Miller. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap. Good music is good music, man. Sometimes,
Exactly.
I try not to title it and label it. Good music is good music.
That's right. You're absolutely right. I want to get to another song, but I have one more question to you about your early career. When would you mark the start of your professional music career? What was the day, time, place?
Um, well, I mean, there's different levels to, I guess once you get compensated for playing or for your services, you're no longer an amateur. But I was getting compensated for gigs as a teenager, in Barbados. So that's on a local level. But to be able to get booked on festivals or play in nationally known venues in North America, I would say maybe 2 or 3 years after I graduated Berkeley, I went out to Los Angeles to network, and I'd never been, and one of the first artists that I met was Peter White. And Peter White heard me play, and he came up to me backstage at this event at a radio station, and he asked me if he's like, "Hey man, you sound really good. Would you be interested in going to Europe with me in northern London to play um, a couple shows?" And so that was kind of like my big break when Peter White asked me to go to do some European gigs with him, because that opened up a lot of other opportunities for me, with getting on the Dave Koz cruise, performing with Jonathan Butler for his Soul of Summer tour with Sheila E. So yeah, it was like a domino effect, but I would say that was kind of a really memorable moment, a pivotal moment in my career playing with Peter White.
So it's kind of serendipitous. You just went out there and you just saw you, and yeah, that's the way it starts for so many artists. And and they're mentored, and they're taken to different venues and different locales and work with different artists. That's the way it starts for so many people. I want to play another one of your songs. I want to play "Gotta Give It Up." So, um, I've always been a huge fan of Marvin Gaye. I mean, huge fan. And I'm gonna say this, and I don't mean to embarrass you in any way, but your interpretation of "Gotta Give It Up" is the best ever done. And I mean, honestly, it's so good. It's definitely yours. It's not just a rehash. It's not just a cover. It's yours. But what do you tell people about why Marvin Gaye and why this one particular song from Marvin?
So, Got to Give It Up is one of my favorite Marvin Gaye songs. I decided to add it to my show um, probably like 8 years ago, and it didn't take long for me to realize that that was the crowd pleaser of the show, and that was the song that always got people up and dancing. It's just something about the tempo, something about the groove that is contagious, and after performing it at numerous shows and getting standing ovations and seeing how people responded to it, hearing people sing along to every word,
Yeah.
that's what inspired me to consider recording an entire album of Marvin Gaye music, because his music is timeless. So I put a lot of work into that project, Dear Marvin. As far as the instrumentation, we try to stay true to everything that is represented on Marvin's albums. You hear a lot of the same instrumentation with the horns, with the orchestration, real instruments. I even played baritone sax. I played some flute on there.
Hmm.
And the most important thing for me was to follow Marvin's vocalizations. So as I was recording each song, each melody, I actually had a copy of the lyrics of each song. So I would make sure I played it exactly how Marvin sang it, I used to go out and party and dance all, because people sing along. That's the first thing people do. They sing along to the words. So if you're playing an instrumental version of a song, if you don't know the lyrics, when people try to sing along, it's not going to match up. It's not going to align. So that's something that was a priority for me to just nail it exactly how Marvin sung it.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about the lyrics. The trombonist Jeff Bradshaw. I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff, but his dad told him to sing, to play the trombone as if you're singing the lyrics. And that's how he
Oh,
learned to play. He learned to play. He always goes to the lyrics,
oh
when he
yeah,
composes.
Jeff is very vocal in his playing. He defies all the limitations of that instrument
Yeah,
and almost makes it sound like a voice or a saxophone.
exactly. Yeah.
He vocalizes, he bends the notes, and he sings through his instrument 100%.
I told him he's the only trombonist that scats. How you do? He imitates people rather than people imitating the music. So, all right, let's play this wonderful song by Marvin Gaye, and this is your interpretation of "Gotta Give It Up." Oh man, that is, I just can't even express how wonderful that is. You did such a great job with that. Here are some of your fans, new fan comments. Kenny Cobain, man, did you nail this? I can hear Marvin, man. How cool. Here's another one. Louis Donato, great cover. You made it all yours, but Marvin lives too. And another one. Oh my God, love how you killed this. Trudy Leslie. So yeah, you had a bunch of fans out there loving your music tonight.
Beautiful. Thank you guys. Thanks for the love.
Yeah. We're running out of time. I want to play a couple more of your songs, so we're gonna have to skip part of what I wanted to cover tonight. I hope you can come back some other time, when you drop a new song or some music, and we can explore more of your musical career and what you bring to so many. But we're really running down on time. So, I want to just talk about songwriting for a minute. Um, of course, there's two types of songwriting that you engage in. You've done collaborations and you do solo. What are the challenges of each? How are they different when you're doing your own work or you're collaborating with other artists?
Collaborating as far as studio work is, is pretty much if I like the song, I'll record on it. If I feel like it's something that pushes me creatively and gives me an opportunity to showcase my strengths, that's a good fit for my musical voice, then I'll agree to do it. But doing my own music, it's I think most writers sometimes get writer's block. If you try to write too many songs in a short space of time, you know, a lot of the songs can start to sound the same. So it's all
Yeah,
about, just pacing yourself. For me, I get my ideas on the plane, just looking out the plane window, seeing the clouds, just having quiet time. Sometimes I'll get a melody. Sometimes I'll get lyrics. Sometimes I'll get a bass line. It's different triggers that inspire me to start to write a song or to write an album, because sometimes it just takes one song to inspire an entire album or project. But like you said, I use different approaches to writing. Sometimes a producer will send me a track. So for Running Hot, my latest single, Paul Brown sent me like three tracks, and that's the one that I picked because I like the tempo and I felt like I could write a strong melody to the chords that were already in place. So I just had to build on that. And then there's times that I have a melody already in mind and I have to ask the producer, or I'll play the chords myself and, work backwards from the melody. So it all depends on the situation.
yeah, and what you're talking about is again different from a lot of other songwriters. Other songwriters will will write down a verse, or they'll come up with a lyric, and but you seem to approach it from all different angles, and not just one. And I think that's what maybe when I listen to your music, I always hear this diversity. I think that explains it to me anyway. Why your music is so complex and so original all the time. So look, we're running down on time. I want to talk about your foundation for a minute, and then we'll get to the next song. Why don't you tell people about the Never Lose Your Drive Foundation, when you started it, and how it's doing?
Sure. Um, so, I kind of attribute my love for golf to my father and my uncle. They introduced me to the game of golf, as a youngster. And as a result, I kind of reconnected with the sport after I finished Berkeley. And I actually had a job at a golf course, which I'm now a member of. And I was also the runner-up for the club championship in the championship flight. I'm a five handicap. And as a result, I've been able to get invitations to many celebrity golf events. And Ray Allen, when Ray Allen was playing for the Boston Celtics, I performed and played in his tournament for numerous years. Jeffrey Osborne, he does his golf tournament in Providence, Rhode Island, and I've performed and golfed in his tournament as a celebrity. Joe Carter from the Toronto Blue Jays won a World Series in 1993, I think, at the walk-off homer. And I've performed and participated as a celebrity in his golf tournament. Chris Tucker, actor, based in Atlanta, I've done his tournament. So as I was participating in these charity events, and I got to understand how nonprofits work and how people are able to give back to a cause that's near and dear to them, it inspired me to want to do the same. Because when I look back at my trajectory and the fact that I was able to take piano lessons, my parents were able to afford piano lessons for me. But there's many students that don't have that opportunity because they don't have access to instruments or their parents can't afford it. So I started the Never Lose Your Drive Foundation in 2016 as a way of using jazz and golf to raise funds to provide musical instruments and musical instruction for kids in Barbados. That program has been running for about 8 years. And this past October, we launched a second branch of Head Start Music right here in Boston. So we have 20 students who are getting weekly music instruction here in Boston on saxophone, flute, trumpet, clarinet, and trombone and percussion as well. So hopefully, we can continue to expand Head Start Music with the help of the Never Lose Your Drive Foundation, and continue to make sure that instruments are readily available to middle school students.
That's wonderful. That's the first thing cut in most public schools in the United States is art and music. The only creative things you ever learn in high school you can't learn. It's terrible. So it's wonderful work that you're doing. I want to play the next song, "Running Hot." And so let me play it, and then afterwards you can comment because we're really running down on time. Okay? This is "Running Hot" by Elan Trotman. Did I play the wrong version?
That was the saxless version of Running Hot.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I got in one of your emails.
Yeah, yeah. Technology. So your listeners got to hear the version without my saxophone.
You know, that's funny because I was listening for the sax. I wasn't hearing it. I'm thinking, what am I missing? Is it me? You know,
No, no.
well,
But
yeah,
happy to report that not only is this song my first individual number one single on Billboard Radio, but surprisingly, it stayed at the top of the charts for 3 weeks.
wow, that's great. That's wonderful. Here's another word. Forest Dallas, smooth, smooth, smooth. Well, even without the sax, people like it. Where can they hear the full version? Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, I dropped a link in the chat. That's the first thing I put in there for you.
Okay, I'll send it out to people. I'll include it
Thank
when
you.
I apologize. Um, I was just following orders.
No problem.
Okay, let's. I want to ask you a question, kind of a thought question. You know, since you've done so many collaborations, if you could collaborate with anybody, a songwriter, a musician, composer, you know, a lyricist, an arranger, producer, any place in the world from any time period ever, who would you want to work with?
Any time period. Man, I don't know. I think Stevie Wonder's definitely some person that's
Oh,
on my bucket list for sure.
yeah, that's a great choice. I think everybody has listened to the album songs in the key of G like a million times. Songs in the key of life. It's everyone. It says when it just his work is so incredible. When you think that his first composition, Fingertips Part Two, he was 13 years old.
Yeah. So many hits, man. If you go to a Stevie show, you get 2 hours worth of hits.
I saw Stevie, and he played for almost 4 hours. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Classics, man. Timeless.
yeah, completely. Well, okay, let's. I want to play the last song because um, this song means a lot to me actually because this song to me really infuses all of the jazz and all of the Caribbean influences. It's trade winds. So why don't you tell people a few words about that and we'll play it right away.
Sure. The album's called Tropicality. Tropicality is a word that was uh, given to me by the late great Mr. Fred Taylor, who was one of the top jazz talent buyers in Boston. He booked Miles Davis. He's responsible for kind of breaking in Grace Kelly into the music industry. And Fred suggested Tropicality as the name of my group because he realized I was trying to, be true to my Caribbean heritage through my music. And I put out that album in the mid 2000s, and I wanted to bring both worlds together, jazz and the music of the Caribbean, hence the term tropicality. And I always was a huge fan of Peter White playing acoustic nylon guitar. You know, it just always kind of is so soothing, and it was a perfect match for the song Trade Winds.
Wonderful. Okay, this is Elan Trotman's Trade Winds. Oh man, that's a great way to close out the show tonight. Um, this is from Peter Weir. The Caribbean percussion rhythms are so perfect. So you got made a lot of fans tonight. That was the right version, wasn't
Yes.
it? Good. Well, look, there's so much more, Elan, I wanted to talk with you about tonight. We're just out of time, unfortunately. But why don't you tell everybody how they can become a fan, where they can buy your music? Why don't you give somebody, some heads up?
Sure. Most of my music is available on all digital platforms, iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, Pandora. You can also visit my website, www.elantrotman.com, ELANTROTMAN.com. And all of my social media is also under my first and last name, ELANTROTMAN, Instagram, Facebook. And make sure you give me a follow. I'll be more than happy to follow you back and keep you up to date on my upcoming tour dates and any other exciting news.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough. I know you had a very long day teaching, and I appreciate everything you've done by being on the show tonight. I definitely want to have you back again. I don't know if you have a minute to hang out for 1 minute after the show. I just want to go over a couple of things and we can call it a night. So thank you so much. And everybody, I'm sure, enjoyed this. We had over 180,000 people tuning into the station to hear you tonight. So you have a nice sized audience. So
Great. Thanks for having me, Mel.
my pleasure. See you in a minute. Bye bye. Well, everybody, that was Elan Trotman. I'm so glad I could have him on the show. Next week, we have another great artist that you're going to really enjoy. His name is Curtis Haywood, and he's another sax player. But I think you're going to find, again, differences and similarities between all of these artists because they're all first rate. So everybody, have a terrific weekend. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. And I'll say good night. I'm Mel Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion Power
My name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.